Hello everyone and welcome to another Android development tutorial video. In this video we're going to be going over actually how to make a small application. So now when we click the button we're going to have the text do things. So we're actually going to create a counter, and if you haven't noticed, this text view is I changed this so that the text is equal to click the button to get a number. And then same thing with this button, I changed the text to click me. So let's go ahead and look at what we have here. So one of the properties in this text view is the text, which we set. And then we also have this ID. So you can go ahead and actually, I'm going to delete this so we can add it if you haven't already added it. So we can actually just start typing ID. And then once you, excuse me, I'm going a little fast. You can actually start typing ID, and the first result is the ID property. So, and then we have the ID tag here, which is at plus ID forward slash, and then we can name our ID. So we can say counter text view, just to keep it nice and verbose for those of you watching. And then we also have the same thing here. For the button. We just called it counter button. Okay, so now we have our layout set up. So let's go into the code and actually have this do something. So the text view is a class, and we can access the properties of that class in the code. So let's go ahead and, well, let's think about what we're creating here. We have a button that we want to press. When we press the button, it changes the text to be a number. And then as we press the button, the number incrementally gets bigger. So we need a point of reference. So the number that's going to be displayed. So we can create a variable, private var, we can call it counter, and then we'll have it equal to 0 because that's going to be our starting point. And then we want the text view to immediately show the default value. So we can actually access the text from the code. So we have counter text view. So this is our ID that we set in the XML file. So counter text view, and then here it is. It's referencing this counter text view. Okay, and now we can access the property by hitting dot text, and of course that is how you access properties. If you have any questions on that, refer to my Kotlin tutorial video with data classes and class properties. Alright, so now we can have this text be equal to the counter, but if you remember, we can't have a string equal an int. Those are two mismatching data types. So what we need to do is convert this integer into a string, which is very easy. We can just say toString, and there we go. So this counter is converted, or this variable is converted to a string. Next, we want to set we want to figure out what happens when the button is clicked, or we want to make sure that we can control that. So again, this function on create is called whenever this activity is created. So it initializes everything inside of, or it runs everything inside of this function. So we can actually, we want to figure out again when this button is clicked. So inside of this function, we can say counter button, and then we will actually set a listener to listen for each click whenever the button is clicked. So we can just say set on click listener, and then of course this is a lambda, so inside of these brackets we can run logic, whatever we want. So we can actually, what we're going to do is, since we don't want on create to be a huge method, we can actually create another method to separate our concerns and to run our logic. So we can just say counter logic, for lack of a better name. All right, so inside counter logic, we want this button to incrementally get higher. So whenever this button is clicked, we want counter to increment. All right, and then we want this counter text view, and then we want to set the text to equal the new count. All right. So now inside of this onClick listener, we can just we can just call this function. All right. So let's go ahead and run it. And now we can see what this app does. So again, we have our button, and then we set an onClick listener, and this listens for each button click. So whenever a button is clicked, it will run whatever is inside of these curly braces. So we have our app running here, and we can already see that the counter text view is equal to the counter. All right, so now we press click me, and it increments. All right, so there we have our UI is actually interacting with each other. So, or UI elements are interacting with each other. So now whenever we click it, we have this function being called. So we'll actually set a breakpoint to see. We can actually set breakpoints, of course, in here and run this in debug mode, and then it will actually hit each breakpoint every time we hit this button, because this onClick listener is being hit every time we tap the button. And so, of course, this function runs. The function then increments the counter, and then the counter, or the text view text, is then initialized as the value of this counter. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. In the next video, we'll be going a little bit more in depth and doing a little bit more complex activities with Android. We'll go into I guess practicing what we've learned already, going into a bit better with design, and going into more logic and implementing some of the fun things that we've been doing with Kotlin. So stick around. I hope to see you guys in the next one.